I'm Paul Comfort, and this is Transit Unplugged. Today, we take you to Boston, where we recorded a live CEO Roundtable with four of America's leading public transportation executives. They included Jay Fox, who is CEO of the Utah Transit Authority, where we recently filmed an episode of our TV show; Nora Leerhsen, acting president of Chicago Transit Authority, one of America's leading transit systems; Rich Davey, CEO of Massport in Boston, Massachusetts; and Harry Wilson, the chair and CEO of MV Transportation. We talked to them up on stage right after we'd had a great celebration. We were celebrating the recent 400th episode of this podcast. It's in rare air, as you know. Transit podcasts and any podcast in general, very rare to get over 400 episodes. Less than 1% of all podcasts go there. We had a great guest on that episode, Mark Miller, who was there at the beginning as the CEO of Trapeze and co-founder there, and helped get the podcast started. He came back now in his new role at CSI and talked to us about what he remembers about the opening of the podcast. If you haven't listened to that podcast, the 400th episode with Mark Miller, I encourage you to check it out. It's a great retrospective. This podcast was a look at what's happening now in these key transit agencies. Of course, Utah Transit Authority is preparing for the upcoming Winter Olympics, and there's so many things happening with the other agencies. So we talked to them, what's happening now, how they ended up being a CEO, what it's like to be a CEO, what do they do day to day? And we talked about one of the key priorities, safety and security. What are they doing about that? This was all on stage in front of 500 people in the main hall of the ThinkTransit Conference. You'll hear lots of laughter and applause during the conversations. Hopefully the microphones picked it up. It was a great interview with these four top leaders. I'm so excited to bring you today from our live CEO Roundtable in Boston. Enjoy. All right, and let's bring our guests for the Transit Unplugged Roundtable right up to the stage right now. You can come right up. We're going to record this today, too, and make this an episode in a couple weeks. This is our live CEO Roundtable. Come on up. We've got some amazing guests for you, and you're going to hear from some of the top leaders in public transportation. When I retired from the MTA, I was CEO of the MTA in Baltimore about 8 years ago. And when I came to work for Trapeze at the time, I didn't come to sell anything or operate any software. What they asked me to do was to kind of be a connector and a promoter of the public transportation industry, an ambassador for the company. And I'm so honored to do that. Modaxo now, the parent company, oversees a bunch of software companies around the world like Trapeze and Vontas. And we are the #1 transportation technology company in the world, with operations at 350 transit agencies and companies around the world. So my job is to promote public transportation. One of the ways we do that is through live events. And we bring in some of the best minds in the industry to talk to you about what's happening in public transportation. You may have never thought about it this way before, but public transportation is one of the only industries where the agencies or companies are not competing with one another. It's not like, we're FedEx versus UPS versus someone. Everybody kind of has a monopoly in their own city. And so we're all trying to learn from each other best practices and share them openly and willingly. And that's what we do every week on the Transit Unplugged podcast. So I'm excited today to do a live event for you like we've done here for many years. Rich Davey, my good friend, is CEO here of Massport. He's the former Secretary of Transportation here in the state of Massachusetts. He's the former CEO of the MBTA, the agency here. He's also the former head of Transit in New York City, America's largest transit system, where 40% of all the rides that happen in any given day happen in New York City. So if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Let's give Rich Davey a round of applause for being with us here today. Thank you for being out here. Nora Leerhsen is acting president of the Chicago Transit Authority, America's second city, as they say, the Windy City. She probably doesn't like that, but it is America's probably second largest transit system. We're so excited to have her come out here and share with you what's happening in Chicago. It's very exciting and innovative what's happening in the Chicago area. They just are having some major changes coming up, but those changes come with some extra funding. So it's an exciting time to be leading the CTA. Let's welcome Nora. Harry Wilson heads up America's largest public transportation contracting company, the largest American-owned company based out of Dallas. And MV Transportation, I used to work for them. I ran Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority's paratransit system for 5 years with MV. And it's exciting to have him come out. He's a rare bird. You don't get him very much in public. So thank you for being here today, Harry. And then representing my new favorite American city, we were just there filming a couple months ago, Salt Lake City and the Utah Transit Authority, sorry, Jay. Jay Fox, my buddy who's executive director there. He just came back from the Milan Olympics because they've got the Olympics coming to his city in a few years, and he's going to share with you some of what he learned there. Are you ready for a good half hour, 35 minutes of conversation? All right, let's dive into it. So first off, I'm going to ask my friend, Rich Davey. Rich, give us a welcome and tell us some about your agency and what you do there.
Welcome to Boston. Hopefully, if you flew into Logan Airport, I guess you did, dropping your fork. That's what Massport does. We run Logan Airport, 2 other airports here in Massachusetts, a lot of the real estate down here in the seaport, and our cruise and container terminal. So we're very excited to have you all here in Massachusetts and in Boston, and hopefully you enjoy the next day and a half with us. So thank you.
And you got some buses, too.
We do. It's interesting. Massport, if it were its own transit system here in Massachusetts, there are 16 transit authorities in Massachusetts, including the MBTA. We would be the 6th largest in terms of the folks that we move. So we have suburban shuttles, the blue buses around our airport. We truck a lot of employees into to Massport. Logan Airport is the closest airport to any downtown city in America, so land is at a premium for us. So we're trying to make sure that all of the activity in the airport is as customer-focused as possible.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. All right, Nora. Nora, tell us some about CTA, Chicago Transit Authority.
Yeah, so the Chicago Transit Authority, we're the 2nd largest transit agency in the country, and we're regularly serving over 1 million rides on weekdays on average now. We have 8 rail lines, 146 rail stations, and that's over 1,600 rail cars running throughout our system. On the bus side, we have 127 bus routes serving over 2,000 buses serving all those vehicles. So we're a vast system. We serve the city of Chicago as well as 35 surrounding suburbs. So when you look at the Chicago region, we provide nearly 90% of all of the rides in the entire region, along with Metra and Pace, which are our sister agencies in the region. So a huge system, constantly growing, and excited to talk about what's on tap in Chicago.
Thank you, Nora. Harry, tell us about contracting in America and about MV and your role there.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. It's great to be with you all. Great to be on this august panel. So as Paul said, MV is the largest contracting company in transit in the United States, American-owned. It's a neat story. We were founded just over 50 years ago by a husband-wife team as a one-vehicle startup in San Francisco because they wanted to provide mobility to their neighbors. And from those humble beginnings, we've grown to the largest U.S.-based company. We have over 10,000 employees across 26 states and Canada. And we do paratransit, outsourced municipal buses, campus shuttles, corporate shuttles, airport shuttles, and some school bus. And it's an exciting time to be in the industry. I didn't grow up in the industry. I became CEO 3 years ago after a career of coming in to transform businesses. And it's been a lot of fun. But I think the last thing I'd note is the opportunity set in this industry, given the changes that are happening in the industry, really create a profound inflection point that we're excited to be a part of.
Thank you, Harry. All right, Jay Fox, Utah Transit Authority. How many miles is your service area, brother?
1,400 square miles, one of the largest service areas in the country. Yeah, 80% of the people of the state live in that service area. I think we're the 7th most urbanized areas where we provide service. It's 40 million trips last year, and that's for a state of 3.5 million people. So in our service area, that's per capita use is north of 20. It's a great system. Commuter rail, light rail, great fixed route, 3 bus rapid transits. Actually, the latest of which is coming online now, and just an amazing group of employees, 3,000 plus. I think some of them are here. Can I hear from the Utah Transit Authority?
He brought his whole staff.
There you go. It's, I always say that if you're the chief executive of an agency, transit agency, you never have to think about operations. that's a great thing to have. And I never have to think about operations. These guys kick it out of the park every day.
That's great. As I mentioned, I was just out there. You should watch the show Transit Unplugged TV on YouTube from Utah. It is a fantastic operating system, clean, great leaders, like you said. All right, so a lot of times folks in the industry are very interested in moving up. How many people would like to be promoted or make more money in their job? Anybody here? Yeah, a few people. So I always like to get some of the CEOs to talk about their career path. And then later on, we'll talk about what it's like to be a CEO. You don't get an open opportunity like this too often to hear from a CEO about their career path, but I always like to ask that. And these four leaders have amazing individual career paths. So tell us how you got started, Rich, and the weaving of how you ended up leading up all these major transit operations.
Because they asked a bunch of other people and they said no. This might take it down for a moment. So I'm actually an attorney, and I was practicing law in New York on 9/11. I was supposed to be at a meeting down next to the World Trade Center on September 12th, actually. So I had a 9/11 moment, to be honest, Paul. I looked around 6 months at that law firm, and I said, this is not what I want to do with my life. So I quit that job, moved back home here. I grew up here in Massachusetts, and volunteered in a political campaign for a person I didn't know. But I ended up showing up every day, and I ended up becoming the transportation policy chief 24 years ago for a gubernatorial campaign in Massachusetts. Candidate lost. I guess I always tell folks two things about career path. One is, it's easy to take a chance, but I certainly did. And two is, I've always had an excellent kitchen cabinet, and make sure you're in somebody else's kitchen cabinet, by the way, as well. So I think that's at least, there's a lot of folks whose shoulders that I've been able to stand on in my career to do some cool stuff.
All right, that's not enough, man. Come on, give me a little more. Talk to me about, what was it like being Secretary of Transportation?
Well, I had a chance of working with Deval Patrick, who was our governor, who had already been reelected. So I would encourage you, if you're working for a public official, work for them in their second term after they've been elected. It's usually, but in all seriousness, he was a terrific boss. And transportation infrastructure was squarely on his agenda. So we made the case in Massachusetts to raise the gas tax for the first time since Michael Dukakis was governor, by the way, 25 years later. To invest in things like the regional transit authorities. At least 3 of the CEOs are here today from our regional transit authorities, and obviously the MBTA folks are here as well. But I think, being able to work for a leader who, believes in public transit in a way that he did, it was just an easy job to have. I also had amazing people, as Jay said. You don't get to jobs like this without having some great people, and I was fortunate, and I am fortunate at Massport to have continued an amazing team.
All right, Nora. Nora has an interesting path. When I do talks I teach a class at Villanova on public transportation systems, and I always tell people the most undervalued position in leadership at a transit agency is the chief of staff. Chief of staff is the keeper of all the secrets, the leader of all the special projects. They know where all the bodies are buried. And in Nora's case, it ended up being a pathway to where she is today. Talk to us about your career, Nora.
Sure. I started my career in public service 20 years ago as a public school teacher, actually. I left undergrad very interested in civil rights and in the history behind why our country is so segregated and so unequal. So I joined Teach for America, which was a program where you were a teacher, but it's designed also with the idea that you would become a future leader with this information that you gained in these years of service. So that was very formative for me. I taught in Philadelphia, 5th and 6th grade, in a very struggling school. I came in kind of bright-eyed and a bit naive about what I could do, and you come up to the face of real poverty in this country and what it looks like. And so that has really driven me. What I ended up doing after that was actually going to study some more history before teaching a little bit more, and then going to law school. So I went to law school very much with the idea of writing policy, not practicing law. And you're kind of unique if you're in law school saying that, and everyone's wondering how you're going to pay back your loans and make any money. But I stuck to that because I believed in it. And then I ended up getting a legal internship at the Chicago Transit Authority in the summer. And it showed me what impact transit has on people. One of the first things I did as a legal intern there was write the background check policy for the agency to align with new federal standards that you had to carry different factors into your analysis of people's criminal histories. And it was just such an example of how dynamic transit is, even in who we hire at CTA. You know, we have nearly 12,000 employees, so the way that we hire is changing Chicago, right? The way we reach out and impact people and communities. So I was kind of addicted to the power of transit since joining CTA 11 years ago. So I started as an intern and had the great fortune of being selected for a detail to the president's office that was supposed to only be 6 months, and I've been there nearly 9 years now. So I did serve as chief of staff, as you mentioned, for 6 years for the previous president, Dorval Carter. And I like to say that the chief of staff role and the principal role, though so close together, in many ways could not be more different in how you approach your daily tasks. And I had always had that buzz from my original years of being in Teach for America, wanting to lead, wanting to impact policy. So when I got this job, I just kind of turned on a light switch and became acting president here.
I was telling Nora over lunch and Jay about how I feel like being the CEO of a major transit system is like being the mayor of a city. There's so much politics involved, and you have this big operation with IT, finance, HR, procurement, legal, communications, all these different. It's a major operation. And how many employees do you have there, Nora?
Just over 11,600.
How about that, huh? 11,600. That's amazing, man. Thank you, Nora, for that. All right, Harry, tell us some about your background story, and if you would, please just touch a little bit on your role at General Motors.
So my background's a little bit different. My first job out of college, the company I was working at ran into some trouble, and I was drafted onto the team that oversaw the turnaround of the company I was working at. I was the worker bee, tasked with all the stuff no one else wanted to do. And I loved the work. It was fascinating, it was interesting, it was challenging, it was impactful, high stakes, which I loved all of that. And so I went to my next job, which was at a firm that invested in turnarounds. And I had some amazing mentors, both financial mentors and operating mentors, where I really learned the basics of what I've been doing for 33 years now. I did my first turnaround when I was 24, $100 million business. I had no business doing that. I was totally underqualified, but it succeeded. And then I did my second one that same year, about $400 million, and just kept building from there. For the first 15 years, I worked for large investment firms like Blackstone and others. And then when the financial crisis hit, I volunteered for what became the Auto Task Force, overseeing the $100 billion of TARP investments in the U.S. auto sector. I was the lead for the General Motors turnaround on behalf of the United States Treasury. When we started, General Motors was losing $4 billion a month, paid for by us, the U.S. taxpayer, and everybody said it couldn't be fixed. And we took it from that $4 billion of losses a month to profitable in less than 6 months, and it's had record profits ever since. It's generated $200 billion in net income in those 16 years in a deal that everybody said wasn't going to work and could never be fixed. Then I started my own firm, did a bunch of other things, and came to MV about 3 years ago. But over the 33 years I've been doing this, I really focused on using a skill set that I've honed in many, many locations, dozens and dozens of companies, to really make a difference and transform the companies I'm working with and to be the best-in-class operator in their industry. The primary lesson I'd leave for everybody is the role of mentors. Everything I have had in my career, I owe to the people who looked out for me, taught me, had patience with me when I didn't know what I was doing, and really were great advocates and supporters throughout my career. And I still feel that way with my board and a lot of people in my network. So they're always important, but especially early on in your career.
Thank you, Harry. Harry's got that vignette, and the story he told is also in my new book, Find Your X Factor. It's coming out in August, and so it's got a great story in there along with some other folks. All right, Jay Fox. Jay has a great career path. Tell us about it, brother.
Yeah, well, I can tell you when I was 6 years old and somebody asked me what I wanted to do when I grow up, I did not say be the executive director of the Utah Transit Authority. But I think my career path, when I jumped to the public sector, so I'm a recovering attorney, the person who hired me into transit was Dorval Carter. When he was chief counsel there, and what a wonderful person to talk about mentors. Just showed me the light all the time. But no, I came up through the federal government, started at the Federal Aviation Administration right after 9/11, was going to the government so I could have a more reasonable life. And then for the next 6 months, I didn't have a day off as we hired up for the air marshals alone. But no, when I went to transit, it just became a whole different thing. Worked for the Federal Transit Administration. ultimately moved over to Amtrak and then SEPTA, and then got a call to come out to Utah. I think that for me, if I was going to sum it up, it's be passionate and be selfless. Because as hard as I ever thought this job was going to be, I wish it was that easy. Being in service to your employees, to your customers, to your communities every day. And the only way you can do that is by, one, getting yourself up every morning and getting yourself motivated and being passionate. And number two, coming from a selfless place all the time.
I didn't realize 3 of you were attorneys. I'm 1, 2, so that makes 4 of us. There's a problem up here.
You'll be getting the bill after the session.
It's amazing, huh? All right, so the hottest topic right now, I think that our federal government is pushing on is safety for public transportation. I mean, you know, I've been doing this for almost 40 years. Safety's always been number one, right? It's always been our number one operation. And buses have always been safer than cars. And trains are even safer than them, I think. And so we are a very safe, generally, industry. And we're a very green industry as compared to cars, whatever. Even if you're running diesel buses, like Mohammed Mezgani says, the head of UITP, come on, you know, one bus takes how many cars off the road? So we have a lot going for us, but we know there's a big focus on safety right now from Washington. And so I'm going to shift who starts each answer. We're going to shift down, Nora, to you. Talk to us about what's happening with safety. And remember, just a few years ago, safety meant something completely different. It was about COVID, and that's still involved in what we do now. The changes we've made in our operations to make sure that we are environmentally safe are much stronger now than when I got started, and you're lucky if the bus got a deep clean once a month. And now it's so much different. Nora, tell us your thoughts on safety and what's happening now.
It's very active in Chicago, the conversation around safety and CTA. So a lot is happening right now, but I agree with you, Paul, that it's always been a primary issue and a focus for transit and certainly for CTA. We just released a new security plan in response to a federal request, a new security plan that laid out a drastic increase in police on our system. And that is a really pivotal moment for CTA, but something that's really important to me as I look at that is not just sort of ramping up a number of police and walking away, but talking about what those police are doing, showing people the way they're on the system, how they're engaging. We've actually put together new types of missions with the police. So they line platforms, they're called TRIP missions. The acronym stands for Transit Rider Interaction Program. And they line platforms in a group and they get on and off the train and check in on passengers, see if anything needs addressing. And this was a huge part of it for me, again, not just to increase the number, but to talk about how they were patrolling CTA, because we're a vast system. So even a big increase in police can kind of get lost for people that they may not run into them or they may not see them. So it's been a huge moment for CTA, and we have a huge partnership with our local police departments. We actually have a new force that's coming on our system. The Cook County Sheriff is also adding to the system. So what I did was take the moment. It's a unique kind of moment, a new audience, a new dynamic, but the issue is important. And so we leaned into it and used it as a way to further instill confidence for our riders and employees in the system. And I know when people talk about security, it's not just police, but I do always start there because I do think that's the fundamental first step. But we're also doing pilots on the system for crisis responders, for violence interrupters. And, you know, transit is such a dynamic environment, especially when you're a 24-hour system that's affordable, that never shuts down. You're going to see everything. And you're going to see all of society's major issues, you know, as on the stage of your system. And I tell my employees that that's very challenging, but we should also be very proud of that because everyone else gets to close their doors and we don't. And we take it all on and we run thousands of rail cars on live track through it all. This is very sophisticated work that requires really smart judgment calls and the coordination of very complex resources. So what I'm trying to do at my agency is sort of hone the pride in that, the honor in that, as opposed to running from it, because we're really experts in things that a lot of other people just kind of get to glance at and walk away. And so I think it's a really important time, but no moment spent on safety is a wasted conversation. So I want to stay focused on it. Also for our employees, there's a lot of focus around transit worker assaults and protecting employees. And that's been a lot of the focus from the police new missions as well. I mentioned a rider, a rail side one, but we're also on the buses. We have a new type of mission where police are riding buses, and then they're also on the street on corridors that are seeing more activity and coordinating together. And we're seeing great results already. So, I think there's a lot of room to grow and really important conversations to have. The last thing I'll say is that you have to promote it and share it with the public. So you can't be afraid to make a video about it and post it and show people, because people will get different impressions of your transit system from the media. So really full speed ahead in terms of showing people other stories than just what they hear from the media stories.
Yeah, you ever heard that old saying, if it bleeds, it leads? That's the media story, right? And so, like Andre Agassi taught us, image is everything. And so we have to go out there and tell our own story, which is why we started a television show, to tell the great story about public transit agencies. You can see why she's president of the second largest transit system in America, can't you? She's got it together, Nora. That's a great response of what you're doing there. Holistic, with the right priorities, I think. Harry, what's it like in a private company like yours? Tell us about your approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I really try to frame it in, frankly, moral terms, which is that safety is our moral obligation to everybody in our ecosystem, our passengers, our teammates, the general public, anyone we come into contact with. And no one gets into one of our vehicles, either as a passenger or as an employee, expecting anything other than to arrive safely. So we have to treat it with that level of urgency and focus. To do that, the most essential thing is establishing a culture of safety where everybody across the organization thinks about it constantly. That starts at the top. So as an example, every single one of our members of our leadership team is certified in wheelchair securement, every single one. And another thing is, every time there's an event in our company, of which unfortunately there are too many because we drive hundreds of millions of miles a year, is I personally reach out to the local team to do an after incident report. I do that not because there aren't plenty of people on our team qualified to do that, there are, but it's because I want to emphasize the urgency and the importance to them and live and walk the walk in every time we have an incident that doesn't meet our standards. So establishing that culture of safety is essential. Another big part of it is constantly updating our training. We obviously do all the typical training at the beginning of one's tenure for our employees, including de-escalation training on the operator safety side. But the important thing is to constantly refresh that. Where we see accidents happen is when people let their guard down, they get complacent, they get too comfortable, and that's, especially when you're operating large vehicles, becomes a problem. And so we're constantly refreshing training to make sure the safety is first and foremost. And the last thing I'd say about the industry, which is really interesting, is it is shocking, when I came into this industry 3 years ago, it is shocking to me that there is not funding for what I would consider smart investments that are clearly in the public good, clearly for the benefit safety, but also have a terrific payback. So for example, how many people in this room drive a personal vehicle that has lane departure warning capability? Almost everybody, I bet, right? How many people have buses that have lane departure warning capability, right? And you're thinking about the difference between whether you're driving a small sedan or an Escalade. Driving a 42-foot bus is a lot harder. And so it's not, I would say it's nuts that we don't support that at the federal level and provide funding to support it. It pays for itself, literally in months. It's one of the things we've been pushing for the industry, but there's a bunch of things like that that are smart investments that pay for themselves that will benefit everybody in this room and the public at large.
When I worked for MV at WMATA's paratransit system, Metro Access, we really emphasized safety, I remember, and it's something I'd never seen in my government service, but we started a program called Safety Never Sleeps. And we had all the executives and senior leaders of our company go to a different garage every morning at 4 a.m. and stand at the gate, greet the employees when they went out, and whatever our focus was, for 1 month it was Don't drive under an overhang. These are raised roof vans, and they only have 11-foot clearance. We had a bunch of them hit things, McDonald's, whatever, and we would stand out there. I remember standing there at the gate at 4:30 a.m., telling the driver, handing them a sheet of paper, and said, remember, your van is 11 feet tall. Have a safe day. And we would just do that over and over and over again. We all went out and did it. But the idea was that everyone was invested in safety. And it sounds like you've kept that philosophy. That's great, Harry. All right, what's it like in Utah and everywhere else you've been, Jay? What are you doing with safety, man?
So Utah is a very religious state. We use the threat of divine retribution to enforce. So I would say it's the way we do it, and I think it's a very successful way, is presence. I hate single points of data, and I would say the same on the media attention to safety. Single stories about safety breaches, it just undermines all the good work we do every day, because it's a very safe environment on our systems. But one thing that's always there, and what it does create, is this fear that there are safety issues, and so presence addresses that. We have an officer on each of our downtown platforms for tracks, and it made a real big difference when they first went out there in terms of ridership right away. Just the fact that they're there makes people feel comfortable. We have an dedicated ambassador team for one of our light rail lines, and we'd like to expand that. When we have a major event, we have a company-wide ambassador program where they're out there assisting customers, and so that presence makes a difference. I think it's not there for an enforcement piece. It's just there to know that all those people that work at the transit agency, including our officers, including our supervisors, our administrative folks, that when they're out on the system, they're there to help you on your way and to show you that you're not alone when you're traveling.
How about in your world, Rich?
Well, obviously aviation, you just have to pick up the newspaper and see that safety's been top of mind, whether it was LaGuardia in the last couple of weeks or obviously Reagan National last year. But I actually want to put my former transit CEO hat on for a second here, Paul, because I think you're all being too kind. Look, and my FTA funding won't get pulled, so I can say, maybe my FAA money will get pulled, but this whole concept of safety being talked about right now, to me, is a bunch of nonsense. And what do I mean by that? In New York City Transit, the number one issue was not crime, it was mental health. And the second issue was homelessness, okay? And the debate most recently in Boston, I'm looking at my friends from the MBTA, was the MBTA was being mean because it wasn't keeping South Station open to house homeless people. The fundamental issue isn't whether transit should be the savior for all of our social ills. The fundamental issue is that government officials, both Republicans and Democrats, need to have an honest conversation that mental health and homelessness drive a lot of these challenges, period. And they're assaulting transit employees, which was our conversation about putting up partitions and spending lots of money on cops who are not, they're not frontline interventionists when it comes to mental health. And so I think that Congress and state legislatures and others, until they actually are willing to have an honest conversation about safety in transit, that it's not about cops and crime, at least in my view, then they're just going to continue to be beating up these people and you all in the audience, and they shouldn't be. So I hope Secretary Duffy was going to pop out of the cake. I would have said the same thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we've got time.
It's data, right? It's, I've taken to the Mike Bloomberg, God we trust, everybody else bring data. That's what the data tells you. That is what the data tells you.
That's good. I like following the data. All right. Let's take a look at something that is working in each of your agencies or companies. This will probably be our last question because we're almost out of time, but give us like one cool thing you're working on right now that's working that we can all take home and say, hey, maybe I could try that. Harry, we'll start with you.
So I think one of the things I've really focused on in my tenure is promoting teamwork and breaking down silos. The company I came to was a lot of domain expertise, but people really focus on their area. Maintenance people did maintenance, safety people did safety, etc. And I have a very different philosophy. I think teams win, whether they're the New York Yankees or other great franchises. But I really believe deeply that teams win. that no matter how good you are as an individual, that the power of people working together collaboratively, sharing ideas and best practices really drives better outcomes. And so we've really sought to break down barriers, get people to work collaboratively, create interdisciplinary groups, promote communication, and I think that's essential to having a great organization, whether it's public or private. But then the other piece to layer onto that is if you believe that this industry, as I do, will go through more change in the next 5 to 10 years than it has in the last 30. In order to successfully navigate those currents, you need a really high-performing team that knows how to work together and drive change. And so that's a huge focus of ours, and I think it's true for a lot of different organizations.
Jay, how about you, brother? What's something great working with you?
Yeah, and I don't think it's not new at all. It's been going on for a number of years in our organization, which is a culture of continuous improvement. So we have Alicia Garrett is out there, our Chief of Enterprise Strategy. She's over that group, but I would say that she really had planted the seed and is watching it grow, throughout our entire agency. I mean, every employee is engaged. We have teams across our agency that are focused on continuous improvement. We celebrate them through awards in front of our board of trustees, and just to see what they do every day. And for many of them, this is not their job. They're doing that in addition to what their regular work is. I was with our 3D printing group, watching them printing out literally parts and all kinds of things for our agency, and then they're running downstairs because they're all mechanics and doing their work. So I want to thank her. I want to thank our executive team for instilling that. It's secondary to our strategic plan, but the focus is not only on continuous improving every day, but celebrating it as well and just building on that over and over again.
Thank you, Jay. Rich?
So our ambition is to be a top 5 J.D. Power and Associate airport in America for customer satisfaction. We're number 10 right now. It's the highest we've ever been. We want to get to 5. One of the things that by the way, don't tell my team, but transit is my first love. So one thing we're doing, which we're super excited about, we'll be the first airport in America to try this, is we own 4 suburban parking lots, park and rides within a 10 to 25 mile radius of Boston. Out in Framingham, which is about 15 miles west, we own a 1,000 parking space garage. This summer, you will be able to park there, go through TSA security there, check your luggage there, and get on a bus that will drop you off on the secure side of the airport.
Wow.
We're thank you. We're really excited about it. And by the way, the airports in your community should be working with you all to try this, really. I mean, I was just talking to a couple folks here about, we have, as I said, space constraint, and I'm also proud, SFO, the San Francisco folks might disagree, but we have the highest transit usage of any airport in the United States. More people take transit to the airport. Again, yeah, you can clap for that. Yeah, thanks to our friends at the MBTA. So we're super excited about it. I think it's going to work, and I think a lot of airports hopefully will be partnering with you. Maybe you can run the bus service. I don't know. We're using landline, but we're super excited about that.
Awesome. All right, Nora, bring us home. Home run hitter.
Sure. I'd say something I've been really proud of over the last year and been focused on is celebrating CTA and celebrating transit in a positive way. We started a podcast, Paul, similar to your success there. I've made it a point to really hit on what we all know about our big urban transit systems, hit a very strong emotional chord with people. They're why we moved to cities. They're why we're still here. They kind of help us remember some of our most pivotal moments in our lives. And I felt really strongly about celebrating that and not just apologizing for CTA and all the ways it can improve, and that you can do both. We can be many things at once. So over the past year, we had performances on CTA. We did this really cool partnership with Chance the Rapper, who's kind of like a legendary Chicagoan for us. And he did announcements over the rail system about how much he loved CTA, and just sort of frankly coming at the negativity with intense positivity. I got the advice from someone, because we were also in this fight for transit funding throughout 2025. And I'm a history student too, Paul, like you, and I reached out to a historian named Nicholas Bloom. He wrote a book about transit history, transit funding history. And he kind of told me exactly what I needed to hear. He said, just keep talking about how beautiful your system is constantly. And I said, okay, that's all I need to hear, and logged off the Zoom call. And then I just kind of did that for 6 months. And it makes sense that if you're asking people to put billions of dollars into your system, you talk about how great it is, how beautiful it is, how, especially in this moment for cities in our country and in our world, transit, when you uplift it and talk about its health and promise, you're doing a lot for cities in general when you do that. So I'm excited to do more things. We're going to do some stand-up on CTA this year. Chicago and stand-up comedy is something we're so proud of. So just kind of coming at any negativity with an excited, positive vibe.
That's awesome. Jay?
Yeah, if I could just, because I know you're wrapping up here, I just wanted to take 1 second to thank you, Paul. So 400 episodes. Just being a spokesperson for us, we had a relationship regional when I was at FTA. Thank you for being an advocate for transit. Thank you for raising up our industry and making it a national story.
So these are the rock stars here of our industry, as well as some of them in the crowd. And if you want to come up and snap a picture of them with us right now and hashtag it on your LinkedIn and say Transit Rocks or something like that, be a good time to do it. Like Nora said, let's make the most of our industry. Thank you for being here today. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's #1 transit executive podcast. I'm Julie Gates, executive producer of the podcast. Many thanks to the team that makes this show happen. Host and producer Paul Comfort, producer Chris O'Keefe, editor Patrick Emile, associate producer Cindy Raskin. Transit Unplugged is being brought to you by Midaxo, passionate about moving the world's people. If you would enjoy behind-the-scenes insights and updates from the show, sign up for our weekly newsletter, which has links to can't-miss conversations with the biggest names in mobility. Head to transitunplugged.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Transit Unplugged.